we did a commercial that went directly against Smuckers. I don't know if remember the tagline with a name like Smuckers, it has to be good.
Oh yeah.
And we said with a name like Smuckers, it doesn't have to be good.
Oh, okay. Came right for the throne. I like it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Slow Smoke Business Podcast. I'm Jared Morgan, and today I am thrilled to be joined by John Follis, who's the founder and CEO of John Follis Incorporated, and a wealth of knowledge about marketing and how to get attention. I can't wait to ask him a bunch of questions about how you can take your project and maybe find a way to get attention for what you're doing. Welcome, John.
Hey, Jared. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on your show.
You're so kind. Thank you for coming on, and I'm just thrilled to be talking to you today. I gave John a little sneak peek before we got started, but we're actually doing a whole chicken today. So this is like a whole fryer chicken with, I went 2 combo rubs on here this time, just sort of shake it out. Now, John, do you ever get on the grill? You ever like to cook?
I like to cook, but I've kind of gone the vegan direction. Or vegetarian
This is the show.
direction.
I got to start asking that ahead of time, because if I knew that ahead of time, we'll do something, maybe something you would have eaten.
I mean, I do eat meat and do eat chicken on occasion, but my default is, plant-based stuff
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So over the weekend, I went to a college football game, and we had some barbecue. People brought in some barbecue, and somebody brought some vegan burnt ends, which burnt ends is typically like a pork thing or whatever. And they brought some vegan burnt ends, and I took a bite as a joke. I thought, and they were I went back for 3 helpings of it. They were incredible. So, you never know what you can do if you try with stuff like that, right?
Right.
So we're going to throw this on the grill really quick. I've got it set at 375. And now, John, I think I told you I'm in Alabama, and in Alabama, this is one of the things to do is to do poultry, and then there's a white barbecue sauce that people do, which is sort of like a mayonnaise-based apple cider vinegar thing. All right. Oh, let me put the probes in there. So, John, you have a super interesting background, and dating all the way back to the 80s, and the field of advertising has definitely changed a great deal in the last, I don't know, what would you say, 10 to 20 years, or maybe a little bit further back?
It's an ongoing evolution. I mean, it's continuing to change with, as you know, being a tech person, with the digital landscape. It changes every month. There's a new shiny digital object to pay attention to every couple of months. But, the major shift happened, in the late 90s, when things shifted from traditional media to digital media, and then just, got more fine-tuned in the early 2000s when Google, came on the scene, and Facebook and LinkedIn and all those big platforms right now that, younger people just didn't think anything existed before. But yeah, so it's, I've seen a major, my career, I've certainly seen a major transition.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what advertising looked like in the 80s versus what advertising looks like today, it's a completely different animal. You started your own firm way back when, and you've also worked with some really big firms on Madison Avenue, which is
Right.
really impressive. And so in going through your background, you've also worked with some badass brands, like just some really interesting companies. First of all, can you tell me a couple of the names of those companies, and maybe one that was your favorite to work with?
I began my career actually in Atlanta, believe it or not.
Oh,
I grew up in Connecticut, went to school at Syracuse, upstate New York, but I was afraid of New York City. I'm not really a city guy, and I certainly spent multiple visits to New York City growing up, but I didn't think I was ready for the big city. So I started in Atlanta working for an agency that had the Delta Airlines account,
oh, okay.
and did that for about a year and a half. And that was pretty boring because it was all scheduling ads. The headline was Atlanta to Houston nonstop. You know?
Ooh, sexy,
Yeah, really
right? It's
sexy
sexy.
stuff. So, I mean, I was ready to leave after 6 months, but it took me about a year and a half to finally get my act together. Moved to Chicago and worked for one of the biggest agencies in Chicago that had, among other things, Pizza Hut
Wow.
as an account. So, I worked on that account for a while. Dial Soap, Sears, I don't know if Sears is even around anymore. Tires. I mean, I really worked on a variety of products and services there, and then finally moved to New York after being in the business for about 5 years and spent the next 25 years working in New York City. The first 4 or 5 of those years were for big agencies in New York. I worked for an agency that had the Volkswagen account. I also did a project on Coke. So, some pretty big brands in New York. But my problem was I was kind of allergic to the corporate environment. I didn't realize it at the time, but the personality traits that got me in trouble in these big corporate environments were the exact same personality traits that made me super successful as an entrepreneur. Just didn't realize until I got fired 4 times.
Yeah. Well, look, so I've also been fired, right? I think uh, you probably find something like that in the background of most successful people. And I wish I should know the author of this book because I'd love to give him a shout out. But someone wrote a book called We Got Fired. And I found it in a Barnes and Noble right after I had been fired from a construction job when I was really young. And that book was so helpful because it just took you through this like pantheon of wildly successful, impressive people that all had some kind of failure like that in their background, and how that can really shape your success in the future. Because to your point, it makes you realize the skill sets that are right for one thing maybe are not right for the other chapter.
Right. And, like you just described, Jared, when I started asking myself, okay, so what now after getting fired that 4th time? Actually, after getting fired the 3rd time, uh, I began to realize that freelance might be a good option for me to continue exploring. And I was trying to learn more about how to do that right. And I came across a book that was all about freelancing. And one of the best quotes out of that book, I'll never forget it because it really resonated, said 80% of firings at big companies are political executions. And I love the way they phrase that,
Wow. Yeah.
because I could definitely relate to that from my personal experience, and that made me feel a little bit less like a loser, that it was a little bit. I mean, I realized that pretty quickly. I was taught and trained to believe in college that it was all about your creative talent. I came up on the creative side of advertising, just
Okay. Yeah.
for your audience, both as a writer and an art director. So we were trained to think that it was about how great your creative work was, and that's certainly important at these big agencies. That's kind of a a very important differentiator between the big agencies. They all, vie for these creative awards as a metric to kind of stand out from their competition. But very quickly realized once I started working in these environments that your political skills were at least as important as your creative talent in these environments. And unfortunately, I was much less talented at politics than I was at creative work.
Certain people can thrive in those environments. I think I sort of figured out too early on in my career that it was hard for me to fit way down the totem pole and sort of sit in a cubicle and just be a guy that turns a crank. It was really hard for me because my mind would get me in trouble because I would start kind of looking at the decisions that were being made by leadership. And this was like super early in my career. And I would go, why are they doing that? Why wouldn't we? And I'm espousing my opinion and not savvy enough to realize like, who asked you, right? Nobody asked you.
Exactly.
And that is exactly how I got fired, right? I was popping off about some decisions that leadership made and then, oops, made a mistake in a project I was working on right about the time I had said some stuff like that, and guess who was out looking for a job? And you learn
Yeah.
from those kinds of things. And um, I hated the people at the time that did it to me. I look back on it now and I think like, well, of course that's what they did, right? I mean, it makes sense. And if I was in their position, I had decisions to make. You don't make them all right, and you certainly it's certainly not helpful to have people on your team chiding you and and chirping at you. But it takes skill, or I guess it takes maturity, right, to kind of realize that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a fine line between, um, stepping on someone's toes with your opinion and, offering constructive advice in a way that that's doesn't challenge them or threaten them, you know?
So let's jump into what I would assume is your bread and butter, which is just the thoughts on advertising and catching people's attention. So you've done some incredible work. I've kind of went through and looked at some of those things. Is there a difference? Is it completely different now when you approach trying to work with a brand today as it was, say, in the 90s before Google AdWords was a thing? Is it totally different, or would you think there are some
No.
common threads?
No, I mean, there are some things. The media is different because, like I said, now it's a question of should I be on TikTok, which obviously didn't exist a few years ago. But the same principles apply. You're still trying to get the attention of your prospect, your prime audience, right? That you're trying to reach. And then once you do get that attention, to grab it quickly with something that's going to want them to it's very quickly I should say it's very difficult to get someone to say something in a very quick soundbite and get them to pull out their wallet and punch in their credit card and buy something. Unless you're Amazon.com and you have all the products that people want to buy and people go there knowing what they want to buy. Uh, Generally, if you're an entrepreneur, you're selling something that takes a bit of persuasion. Why they should buy from you versus the other four or five competitors out there. So that's the challenge, I think, of any entrepreneur who's selling a product or service, is to communicate in a way that not just informs people, but excites them. It touches them, and that's
Yeah.
where you got to touch people on an emotional level. A lot of business owners don't realize that they just think if my product is so great, all I need to do is tell people about my product. Well, they can't step outside of their own shoes. They think their product is great, and maybe it is great, but you got to be able to stand outside of yourself and imagine someone who doesn't know anything about your product or service or knows very little about it. And what are you going to say about your product that's going to really get them excited?
Yeah, it's something I've always said when I was working with marketing departments. You know, or if you're working with you're right, kind of earlier stage entrepreneurs, especially if they're more product oriented or tech oriented, they think, man, if people would just know that this widget does this, and the thing I would always say to them is like, well, why do they care, right? Why does somebody care that your widget does X? And if you keep asking that, it's an annoying question, but eventually you get down to, well, what is it going to do for them, right?
Right.
And that was kind of the thing for me, was trying to find the moment when it touches like, "Ooh, I want that," or "I need that," or "That solves a problem that I have," right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're selling a product that people know about, if you're selling hamburgers or chewing gum or soap, it doesn't take a lot of explaining, about what your product
Right.
is. It's just a matter of just kind of getting it out there, reminding people that we're available. But I would say that there are a lot of businesses that, again, do require a bit of education for the consumer about exactly what your product does, what is the benefit of your product, and it's a process, right? It's like connecting the dots. Uh, the first thing you need to do is get something that intrigues them, right? So they want to know more. So, maybe it's a short video, maybe it's a 60-second video that they come across on YouTube or TikTok, and that intrigues them enough to wanna go to your website, right? Or make a phone call and talk to someone at your company. So it's a process, a step by step by step. And if it's a more expensive product, what they call a considered purchase item, it's going to require multiple connections before someone's going to be convinced to spend their money on that product.
Right. You know, so a selfish thing that I'm want to ask here, which is I was going to say, if John's nice, I'm going to ask this question, right? And you're nice, so we're so the question that we always wrestled with. So for those that are listening that aren't familiar with my background, founded a company called ProctorU. It's an online test monitoring service to make sure that students and test takers can take a test over a webcam, making sure they get the instructions and they don't cheat. Well, in the several years at the very beginning of ProctorU, we were a startup, and the challenge that we had was we were trying to get schools. We were trying to help schools solve a problem that they didn't want to admit they had, and so that it was such a challenging notion. And I'm not sure that we ever fully got it right, frankly. Um, if I was to bring you a situation like that, how do you get someone to admit they have a problem before you can even get to pitching what your product could do for them?
Uh, I'm laughing. So I don't know how much research you did about me, Jared, but um, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, when the digital landscape was really changing, and I was coming across a lot of small business owners that were really confused and overwhelmed by the changing landscape, I would talk to these people, and half the time I felt like I was the marketing and advertising expert that I was, but the other half of the time I felt like I was a therapist talking to these people. And I just realized whenever you're talking to someone that's got a marketing challenge, it is kind of like therapy talking to these people. And because for the same reason you mentioned, some of them, for whatever reason, don't want to admit certain things, or they don't know about certain things, or they have certain fears about certain things. And before you could even begin to help them and solve their marketing challenges, you have to sometimes get over these um, mental or emotional or psychological barriers that they're
Mm,
dealing with. And I am no therapist by any means, but um, years ago, Jared, I volunteered to be on a 24/7 phone crisis line where people would call up because they're feeling suicidal or they have some issue that they want to talk about. And thinking back on that, it was the best training. Before I was allowed to speak to anyone who's potentially suicidal, I had to go through 50 hours of training that involved what they call active listening. And that's a process of getting your person to talk about what's going on with them and try to get to the core issue. So I applied that active listening a lot when I was doing my Follis marketing therapy. So if I was working with a client like you just described, you have to kind of be very delicate when you're talking about them, because if this is something that a pain point for them, right? That they don't fully want to acknowledge, you have to be kind of delicate. So I think to answer your question, it would be a challenge. I think it would be, first of all, developing a rapport with them so they can feel comfortable with me, right? That I'm not trying to sell them anything, and hope that after a series of conversations, maybe 2 or 3 hours of talking to them, that they would let their guard down enough where I could begin to get to that pain point and help them to understand that until they acknowledge um, that they've got a problem, you can't begin to help them with that problem. That's the first step, like, right,
right.
when you're an
Yeah.
alcoholic or something like that. The first step in recovery is to acknowledge that you've got a problem, whether it's gambling or whatever. And that same acknowledgement applies to a business owner. And this is, there's some business owners, Jared, that I just realize I can't help because they're just not willing to accept the reality of some of the issues. And if they're not willing to accept that, then I can't begin to help them.
Yeah, you can't help everybody, and certainly when people come in with their own kind of mental blocks, tearing down those things are hard. But how do you, if you get through there and you're working with you, so you've kind of broken down that mental barrier, and you want to put a message together that grabs someone, is there a formula that you use, or are there some kind of things that you always go back to when you say, like, okay, I'm working with a brand A here and we need to get people's attention? Is there a process that you could say to, like, an early stage entrepreneur that says, I need to get attention for my product or and my company here?
Yeah, I know everyone is looking for a process or a system, and there are tons of marketing people slash salespeople. And I would dare to say that these people are more salespeople than they are really smart marketing people, because they want to sell you their program, their magical program or system that just follow these 5 easy steps that are guaranteed to work. And the fact of the matter, Jared, is that every business, just like every person, um, though they may have similarities to other businesses in the industry, there's always something unique about them. So I would never say that there's really one simple solution that can work for all these businesses. I really believe that to really be effective, it really involves a custom approach that's specific to their business issues. Again, they may be similar to other similar business issues, but not exactly the same. So I think it's a mistake to even suggest that something that worked for some other businesses will also work for your businesses, because nothing is exactly the same. And that slight difference can make all the difference in your marketing approach, what you do to market your business or service. So that's why it before I can even begin to help anyone, it does require several hours of conversation, so I really intimately know, all their issues, and can figure out how to then begin to put together a marketing plan that's then followed by a creative execution. But it starts with a marketing plan and what is the right strategy, because the best creative will do nothing if the strategy is wrong, and I'm sure you know that.
Right, yeah, for sure. And it makes me feel a little better. I'm going to check the chicken while we're saying this. It makes me feel a little better because the best marketing professionals that I've worked with have all not had a particular, like, formula. It's always been, well, let's talk, and um, let me ask you a bunch of questions, and then we end up, finding out, hey, there's some soft spots here that we can start to work with.
Right.
Chicken looks pretty good, by the way. I'm going to keep that closed. And I come away not knowing that there's a formula, or there's like a way that they operate, but sort of finding, I think, smart people that I feel like, and I've worked with several multiple times in a row. And the reason I do that is because there's something about this group of people's brains that seem to kind of tease out the right answer. But you never sort of get to it the same way as you did the last time.
Yeah, and that's not to say, Jared, that there aren't certain things that are true about all kinds of effective advertising and marketing. It certainly helps if your product or service has a benefit, right?
Right.
It's a little bit different when you're dealing with a product or service that's what's called a parody product, right? It's really no different. When you're in that situation, you don't really have, to use a culinary explanation, there's no steak. The steak is the same, so you're forced to just sell the sizzle.
That's
It's
right.
it's all
Yeah.
sizzle, right?
Yeah.
But if you have something special about your steak, then you could really get to the product benefit and focus on that. And that's always better, but that's not always the case. But regardless of what your product or service is, what's true in every case is that you really have to say something in a way, and this is where the creativity comes in. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it that can make all the difference in whether or not someone's going to respond to you, right? So, and that's again where I think the creative talent comes in. This is again how big agencies would pride themselves on the fact that um, their creative product uh, helped the clients that they worked with become more successful because the creative work uh, not just got attention but was effective in that it helped increase sales. So you've got to have the right message, and you have to engage people quickly and kind of captivate them quickly with their message. If it's a video, right? I when I was in the business in the 80s, I did some TV commercials. We did 30-second commercials and 15-second commercials. Well, now we have YouTube and TikTok. It's the same thing. It's just not on network TV. There's no media buy involved, but it's still a video. It's still 15 seconds or 30 seconds, and you've got to captivate people quickly. So the fact that I'm trained to think in 30 seconds or 15 seconds from the 80s still applies to TikTok right now.
Just more dance moves probably on TikTok than there were in the 80s. Or maybe not. So I pick at TikTok a
Right.
lot, but I had so the guys that I work with for this show, finally wore me down and they said, "Hey, let's get you on TikTok." And once I realized I did not have to do kind of like it was it's possible to talk on TikTok and not be doing dance moves at the same time, then the second half of my story began, right? So it's interesting to find how those different medias change the conversation or change, I guess, like you said, change the medium, but it's getting people's attention, doing something provocative, thinking about how that affects your brand or your story. I guess those things remain the same.
They always remain the same. Yeah, it's about, it starts with a lot of groundwork before you even get to thinking about the creative execution. It really, half the battle is just having the right strategy, the right message. Um, I got honored at the United Nations for a child abuse ad that I came up with. Um, this was an ad, Jared, that I came up with. Just on my own while watching a TV a documentary on PBS that was profiling the life of Adolf Hitler and mentioned that Hitler was abused on a regular basis when he was a kid.
Mm.
And a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought this could make a great child abuse ad. And the strategy was that it's not about what you do with your kid. You may not even have a child, but the fact of the matter is that child abuse can be a problem for everyone in the world because someone who was abused as a child and didn't resolve their issues can exercise that abuse in a way that really screws up the world and screws up everyone's life.
Wow. Wow.
And there are many examples of well-known murderers and rapists and mass killers like Hitler and Charles Manson and Mussolini and Lee Harvey Oswald, that if you look in their history, they were all abused as kids.
Mm.
So that angle, the strategy of saying child abuse hurts all of us, was kind of a different strategy, a different direction than most child abuse ads took. And someone at the United Nations saw that ad and thought it deserved an award. So that was kind of cool to be honored there.
That's incredible. Like what an honor. And I can see why. Like you've done several provocative things or moving types of pieces. Is there, other than, let's set that one aside because obviously you're very proud of that one. Is there another piece of work in your career that stands out to you and you say, man, I'm really proud of that one?
Yeah, well, it's the account that actually enabled us to start our advertising agency. I had just met a guy who was an account exec and a master at new business. He was amazing, very, very aggressive New York guy who was looking for someone like me, a creative talent. And we just started collaborating. And for a couple of months, nothing really happened. But then we had an opportunity to pitch an account that I didn't I didn't even again, it was a small business, I never heard of it. It was called Sorrel Ridge Jam, and, I we had heard that, uh, I think they billed maybe a $500,000 or $1,000,000 in billings. They wanted to do some TV work, and, my partner found out that they were throwing their account up for grabs, and we were one of 5 agencies, and we weren't really an agency at the time, we were just 2 guys basically freelancing. We had
Right.
no agreement. We just had a verbal agreement between us, nothing even on paper. But my partner said, they're looking for a kick-ass TV commercial, and the thing about their product that's special is that, and this was in 1988, so this is probably before you were born, but
No, come on now. Don't shave those many years. I was 81, 40 years old. Come on.
okay,
But I
okay.
was young.
So in '88, people weren't that health conscious about what they ate, and he had been selling this was an all fruit product, so it didn't have refined sugar in it, it didn't have corn syrup in it, it was just all fruit, and he had been selling it in health food stores for years, and finally decided that he was going to take a leap of faith and try to put it on store shelves right next to Smucker's
Oh, wow.
and compete with Smucker's. Now, you've heard of Smucker's, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Smucker's at the time, probably still now, was the number one jam in America, and he wanted to do a commercial that pointed out that his jam was healthier than Smucker's, hoping that people would give a shit about that. So we had an opportunity to do a commercial, and we did a commercial that went directly against Smucker's. I don't know if remember their tagline: "With a name like Smucker's, it has to be good."
Oh, yeah.
And we said, "With a name like Smucker's, it doesn't have to be good."
Oh, okay. Came right for the throne. I like it.
That's essentially, I said, "Listen, what is there?" It was like a David and versus Goliath challenge, and we had, their media budget was something like uh, $20 million, and ours was like $300,000. So we knew we had one shot at it. And again, this is where the creativity comes in, right? But it also comes out of a really smart strategy. We definitely had, they were the leader in the category. We had a clear advantage. So the question was, how can we communicate in 30 seconds that we are a better product than Smucker's if you really care about what you eat?
Mm.
So that was basically our message, that with a name like Smucker's, it doesn't have to be good, and we're better because we're 100% fruit and nothing else. No refined sugar, no corn syrup. And 3 weeks, 4 weeks after they ran that in the New York market, I think, California market. Markets are people are maybe more educated and concerned about things, stuff like this. And sales went up 90%
Oh, wow.
the first month, and for the year went up over 50%.
Whoa.
And it became a Harvard business case study
Wow.
because it was so successful. So, I mean, that's pretty rare that comes from a TV commercial. But his initial media buy, and this was in 1988, his initial media buy was 350K, and he immediately put another 500K because there was such a direct response
Right.
from
Yeah.
what was happening. And he said, right, he said I think he had to put his do a second mortgage on his house to get the money to put into the TV media.
But there was a
But
clear ROI, right?
there's a
From
clear
what you had just done.
ROI,
Yeah.
absolutely, and that's pretty rare, especially from a TV commercial, that you see such a direct result. But again, we were fortunate in that we had a client, A, who had a better product, but B, had the balls, quite honestly, to run something. And his lawyers, he ran it by his lawyers, and his lawyer said, "Listen, you get ready because Smucker's is probably going to sue you for this." And my response was, "Are we saying anything that's not true?" And he said, "No, but that doesn't mean that they still won't try to sue you." And they said, "Well, listen, if we would win that lawsuit, go ahead, let them sue us. We'll get more press because we're getting sued."
Oh, yeah.
So, my argument to the business owner was, let's hope they sue us, Great. That would be great because then we'll go to every network meet business channel and let them know what's going on, that this big bully Smuckers is suing the little guy because we're poking a nerve at them and exposing the fact that their jam is full of shit.
Yeah, I mean, and at that point, then you get that's free airtime, right? You're all over the place.
Whenever you can get PR, that's free publicity if you can get it.
So that's a great case study of not just an effective ad campaign, but on the value of a company working with an experienced agency, even though you were just becoming an agency at the moment. Which, by the way, I want to call out that moment you said, "Oh, we weren't even a thing yet." How many entrepreneurial stories start with something that feels like you're pretending to be something, and then you become it because you're doing the things that make you that level.
Exactly.
We have so in our story, I remember very early on at when we were starting Procter U, we talked to an ad agency, very reputable ad agency here in Alabama, does incredible work. And I was ready for us to kind of go to the next level and kind of, you know, look like a bigger brand or look like a company that is worth, investing a lot of capital into and investing your trust into. The problem was, when we got to it, the bill was so much larger than we could really wrap our head around. Could we have made it work? Maybe, but we passed, and we went another probably, I don't know, 4 years before we actually brought in an ad agency. Actually, I'll give them a shout out. Cayenne Creative in Birmingham, Alabama, did an outstanding job creating what became a global brand for us. But at the time, everything was like done in house, and it was had a real kind of junior varsity feel to it. So what kind of advice I'm just saying, I don't know that I got that decision right. Is there, when you talk to somebody who's early on and it's going to be a stretch to afford a professional like that, do you feel like it's better to stretch and do that, or is it better to kind of keep plugging away until you can take a big swing with a big agency?
That's a really good question. There may be a different answer for different people. You just touched on an issue that I think is a huge challenge for any business owner because so many quote advertising and marketing people may not be that great at advertising and marketing, but they get someone who's an amazing salesperson to do all the fast talking and sell you on working with them.
Yeah.
And I see these guys now on YouTube and on TikTok, and they're fast talkers, and they sound great, and they look great, and they talk really fast, and they hit all the sound points and everything like that. But it's very difficult for a business owner to know whether or not they're working with someone who's really good that they can trust. And what I would suggest is to find someone that you can at least begin to develop a relationship with where you're not going to break the bank to begin working with them, right? So it's not all or nothing, as you just said,
Right.
where it's either, wait till you've got the funding and you've got the tens of thousands of dollars to hire a really good agency or do nothing. There are things in between that you can do. And this is one of the reasons why I started my marketing therapy, because it allowed people to get to know me by just hiring me on for a few hours or a couple of hours, and take it step by step. First of all, decide uh, after working with me for a couple of hours if they have a good feel for me, if they like me, if I'm giving them advice that they can put into practice right away, and take it just in baby steps. So that would be my answer. Uh, Try, it's not an all or nothing thing. See if you like an agency or you like a marketing service that seems to be expensive. My hope is that they can offer a way to work with them that can allow you not to break the bank and begin to start a relationship with them, even if it's just on a smaller project or something. Let me just add to that, Jared. I'm a big Apple fan, and I think maybe a lot of entrepreneurs are big Steve Jobs fans, right?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, of course, has the reputation of being the marketing genius, behind Apple. But if you dig a little deeper and look at the history of Apple, you will know that in 1976, when he and Woz started Apple, only a couple years after they were working out of their garage, Steve realized that marketing was a very important piece of the puzzle to grow Apple. And he, as much as he might have had a good feel for Apple, I mean, for marketing, and respected the value of marketing, he was also smart enough to realize that he needed to find someone or an agency to help him. And
Right.
he found a guy by the name of Regis McKenna, who in 1976 he hired. Regis at the time had an advertising agency on the West Coast and also did marketing consulting, and actually helped Steve come up with the Apple logo. His team helped create the Apple logo and really created the marketing foundation, the marketing and branding for Apple, and worked with Steve for the first several years of their business that really helped establish Apple and create the brand that Apple became. So that's a great example. I don't think he had a lot of money because it was the year that they incorporated. I think he had a little investor money at the time that enabled him just enough money to hire that. But here's an example of someone who realized that very, very early on in their stage of their business, that marketing was a very, very important piece of their puzzle, and they needed to get someone who was really good at it to help them grow their business.
Yeah, I sort of think of it too. The way you're saying it lines up with things we talk about on the show a lot. I mean, the people that you work with, the people that you get on your team are really one of the most important things that's going to make your business succeed or fail, and the talent you surround yourself with, and making sure people are motivated and lined up with their skill sets. But that can also apply to outside contractors like a marketing agency, right? I mean, yeah, we can grind our teeth about how much it's going to cost, but at the end of the day, if that agency can help you go to the next level, and like we talked about before, there's a clear ROI, why would you not do that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's at the end of the day, you need to find a way to make that happen, or you're just going to be slowly rowing the boat, and it's just going to be really, really painful to continue to do it that way.
Right. And most entrepreneurs, when it comes to marketing and advertising, they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
They know a little bit about it, but as you may know, since you've had a successful business and been involved with it for some time, marketing is a very confusing, multifaceted discipline that is part science and part art and creativity. And
Yeah.
it's really the combination and the right mix of both that analytical, strategic, uh, 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 scientific side and the creative, artistic side that makes it work. And it's constantly changing. Marketing today isn't what marketing will be a year from now. It's just constantly evolving, and this is why I made it my business to really always stay on the edge of the evolving landscape. My first website went up in '96. I was podcasting in early 2006. I had a podcast called The Marketing Show.
Ahead of the curve on the podcast thing for sure.
Yeah, I did that for 7 years because when I was learning about it in 2005, I just thought it was the coolest thing, and it was another media channel that I just didn't wanna read about. I wanted to get involved with it, and I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, John, this has been such a treat talking to you. I want to check the chicken one more time, but if somebody would like to get in touch with you or would like to, we're getting a little burn there on the top. We might need to move that around. So we still got some time on the Pro. If someone would like to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Well, they need to know my last name and know how to spell it correctly.
Okay. So it's
Because
Follis. Give us the spelling, right? Follis.
There you go. And my Follis, my website is pretty simple. It's follisinc.com. So, hopefully that's simple enough to remember. Or they can just, punch that into YouTube or Google. But follisinc.com is my website, and a lot of information about, that's where they can find everything they need to know about me.
So excited to have had you here, John. And thank you for sharing some wisdom with our listeners. And we hope to have you back soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jared. Pleasure to be on your show.